You know, we all remember the late, great Henry Termeer, the Dutch entrepreneur who blazed biotech trails at Genzyme. Henry set the stage for all of us, and we still keep that patient-centric mentality going today. And it's in his spirit that we present our annual Innovative Leadership Award. This award honors somebody who has contributed significantly to the growth and success of the life sciences in Massachusetts, is a leader in their community, and a leader for employees by creating a positive work environment. This year, a special and worthy woman is receiving this award. Lita Nelsen has been called, quote, biotech's behind-the-scenes baroness. That's awesome. Isn't it, Lita? That's awesome. Who redefined how universities launch startups. For 30 years, until 2016, she ran the technology licensing office at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. You can do it. You can clap for that. I'm sure all the Harvard people want to clap for MIT right now, right? We love MIT, Lita. Lita, your tenure contributed immensely to the vast biotech ecosystem in Cambridge and toward Kendall Square becoming the best place in the world for the life sciences. The culture that you created at MIT has led to the tech licensing office handling an average of more than 90 licensing agreements and launching 25 companies each and every year. Before Bill Belichick created what we call the Patriots way, you knew I had to get it in there, didn't I? All you people visiting Boston, welcome to Titletown. We're good at sports too. Had to get it in, not on the script. Before Belichick created the Patriots way for what the rest of the NFL has tried to emulate, Lita, you created the MIT way, and universities everywhere have been inspired to emulate your approach. But more importantly, you exemplify the MassBio mission of patients first, with your focus on impact, not income. It means the best science leaves the lab and makes a real impact on patient lives around the world. And now, Lita, it's our pleasure to present you with MassBio's 2019 Henry A. Termeer Innovative Leadership Award. How about joining me on the stage?
Thank you so very much. I'm honored, and I'm especially honored because the award now is named after Henry Termeer, as all of you know, one of the pioneers and inspirations of biotechnology. I knew Henry over many years. I was privileged to know him, and I am overwhelmed with this award. So I was asked to give a short talk on anything I felt like. Well, during my 30-year tenure in the MIT TLO, I was visited literally by hundreds of people from throughout the US and around the world, from governments, universities, regional development organizations, and they all wanted to know how to turn their university research into the economic development that was flourishing in Kendall Square. What was the magic ingredient? What was the magic sauce? As we'll see, there's no single magic ingredient. The sauce is a complex ragout with many interacting ingredients that together make the whole greater than the sum of the parts. A few of you are old enough to remember Kendall Square in 1960, which is when I came as an undergraduate to MIT. It was the dying remnant of when Cambridge had been a major industrial center of the United States. In 1960, the industrial part was occupied by a few small factories, decaying buildings, old warehouses, and people making things like rubber products, metal fasteners, foodstuffs, etc. My husband, who captained the MIT sailing team, said that you could tell which way the wind was blowing on the Charles, whether you smelled soap or chocolate or the sweet smell of the Necco factory. The only place to get meal was the F&T Diner, which now has a memorial near the inbound T station in Kendall. Let's just say it was no place to have a business meeting or to take a date. And by the way, you can still see a remnant of the old Kendall Square area in the still standing 1880 Kendall Boiler Company on the corner of 3rd and Binney, remarkably just diagonally across from the big shiny El Nylon building. Change began a long time ago with a new focus on entrepreneurship based on basic research and science. The end of World War II and Vannevar Bush report led to massive increases in federal funding of basic research. Research laboratories like those in universities like MIT and Harvard grew quickly and kept growing, adding new useful knowledge to the world and turning out graduates educated at the leading edge of science and technology. And with a massive increase in funding from the NIH, hospital research laboratories grew apace. In the late 1950s, a small number of research faculty members teamed with entrepreneurial business people to form new companies around university and science, mostly in electronics, and thus grew the Route 128 Massachusetts Miracle, funded largely by government contracts and the beginning of technology-based early-stage venture capital funds. American Research and Development Corporation, formed in 1946 by George Dorio of Harvard and Carl Compton, then president of MIT at the time, you see the two schools can get together, was probably the first of these science-oriented early-stage VC funds. In 1957, they invested $75,000 in an idea from a guy named Ken Olsen at MIT's Research Laboratory of Electronics, and digital equipment was born, and the computer revolution in Massachusetts began. But Kendall Square was still sleeping. Then came biology. The discovery of the double helix in the early 1950s, followed almost 20 years later by Cohen and Boyer's gene splicing technology, meant that practical use of biology for products became possible, and the genetic engineering and biotechnology revolutions began. Cambridge was the first to benefit, with Biogen, Repligen, Genzyme, and a few others leading the way. But okay, we know Henry Termeer started Genzyme downtown Chinatown in Boston, but he soon came home to Cambridge. A very important and perhaps surprising event helped make Cambridge preeminent in the state as the place for biotechnology companies. In the mid-1970s, there was a widespread global fear of genetic engineering per se. And the Cambridge people worried that the bug that ate Cambridge would emerge from MIT's laboratories. To calm those fears, Mayor Vellucci assembled a team of leading scientists and others to draft regulations regarding the use of recombinant technologies in the city. So the Cambridge Recombinant DNA Technology Ordinance was passed in 1977, quite early in the game. I was involved in a little biotechnology company not too long after that, and what we found was that the rules were straightforward. And if you followed, permission came to open your laboratories came quite quickly. As a result, at least in part because of this intelligent regulation, the vast majority of new Massachusetts technology startups in the 1980s and 90s opened in Cambridge. And there was another critical law for the biotechnology industry, this time federal, passed the Bayh-Dole Act of 1980, which was a remarkable piece of bipartisan legislation for today, anyway. The act simplified the ownership and exploitation of patents arising from federal funding of research in laboratories, hospitals, and other nonprofit research institutions. The Bayh-Dole allowed transfer of the title to such patents to the university itself and allowed the universities to grant licenses to the patents and to collect royalties, with a fraction of any royalties to be paid to inventors, thus providing some financial incentive to both the universities and the researchers. And again, the regulations were simple, straightforward, and for those of us in the tech transfer world have been trying to persuade for the 30 years following that it ain't broke, don't fix it. The express purpose of the Bayh-Dole Act was economic development. The federal government was spending over $100 billion a year, more now, in funding basic research in universities. But with the federal government owning most of the patents arising from the research it sponsored, very few of these inventions were being taken up by industry. Transferring title of these patents to the universities meant that the patent administrators could work on the ground with the inventors, that is, the Tech Transfer Office and the faculty, to translate their findings into companies. So the technology licensing profession grew rapidly after a few slow years in which the profession taught itself, and a few universities, such as Stanford and MIT, had successes that others could follow. A recent survey now by the Association of University Technology Managers showed results from 200 US research universities and hospitals had granted in 1 year alone 6,300 licenses and helped start up over 1,000 new licensed companies that year. And as Bob mentioned, thank you, MIT is now starting up over 25 companies a year, a good fraction of which are in biotech. Quite a large number of the companies here had their origins from research and licenses from Harvard, MIT, and the dozens of other universities and research hospitals concentrated in the region. So success attracted more and in turn built the infrastructure around it. When MIT licensed its first biotech in the late 1980s, biotech companies, the founding venture capital came primarily from New York or California. The few early stage VC firms in the region at the time did not invest in biotechnology and would tell you that. But early investments in biotech success soon led to new local venture firms and big established firms like Venrock, et cetera, starting to open offices in Massachusetts. And of course, by now, there are dozens of VCs in the company, around. Real estate companies responded to the opportunities. They were willing to rent short-term leases to Fly-By-Night Biotech Incorporated. And the old warehouses became brick office buildings with then the big pharmaceutical companies moved in. Many of you may not know that as of 30 years ago approximately, there was not a single major pharmaceutical company in Massachusetts, or even with offices in Massachusetts. And look at it now. The big companies moved in, beginning opening offices and laboratories to be close, as you know, to the source of their new products, to fill their pipelines from the biotech community. This latter trend accelerated as many of the big companies radically pared down their internal R&D in the cause of short-term earnings, and therefore had to turn to biotech. The universities also responded with incubators, mentoring services, and other components of the entrepreneurial ecosystems to help their faculty and students think about starting companies. And then perhaps the most valuable component, people. Everywhere in the world that I've been invited to go, where local governments and universities want to accelerate biotech entrepreneurship, usually in the cause of economic development, the scarcest resource is not money, but talented managers, experienced entrepreneurs who could start new companies, manage science towards product development, and raise capital for it. The density of biotech in Massachusetts means that we're growing our own scarce resource. Scientists and lower-level managers in the many companies of the region gain experience, insight, and personal connections in small, growing companies that then qualify them to become the next generation of CEOs. Essentially, clusters feed themselves. And finally, let us not forget the strength of networking. Cambridge and Boston Biotech, as you know, is one of the most dense clusters anywhere. There are hundreds of opportunities to get to know each other, like the gathering here and the many others held by the Mass Biotech Council. And the people understand that it's important to network, that knowing each other is part of our strength. So everyone knows everyone after a while, and parenthetically, don't misbehave, they'll all know. More seriously, ideas are exchanged, new ideas are catalyzed, and resources can readily be found if you have a strong proposal. So the magic sauce that built Kendall Square is a complex, interactive mixture that's been thoroughly simmered and stirred by talented people over many decades now. It's the envy of the world, and I'm very grateful and proud to have been a small part of it. Thank you.